I've played the Pokemon TCG for half of my life, and after putting probably over 100 hours into Pokemon Pocket, I feel qualified to do a tier list on every single deck in the format. Guys, real quick, I'm super appreciative of all the support on the channel. It has been insane, so to thank you guys, once we hit 1,000 subscribers, we're going to do a bit of a Pokegold giveaway, help you get some packs. Won't matter what device you're on, iOS or Android, we'll make it work. So be sure to sub. Look forward to it. Okay, so let's get into it. Now, as you can see, I have a ton of decks here, but first we got to know, how are we ranking this? What is it based on? So I'm going to be doing this in a tournament sense, and I'll show you what I mean. So S tier is going to be, this deck will definitely win tournaments. It has won tournaments. It would not shock me at all if it won. If not, you're at least going to see it in top 8 of every single tournament. A tier is going to be, this deck is probably going to find its way into the top 8, maybe one of them. I would be a little bit surprised if it won a tournament, but it wouldn't be out of this world crazy. B tier is going to be, I might expect to see this deck pop up in top 32. If it got in a top 8 spot, it would surprise me. C tier is going to be, all right, I would expect you to maybe go positive with this in a tournament. If it ever placed above top 32, I would be super, super surprised. And F tier is, if you're playing this to a tournament, you are going negative. There is no hope for you. Please pick up any other deck. All right, so let's start with some bullying. We got to get it out of the way. Let's start doing some F tiers. I'm going to first pick Golem and Onyx. Okay, this deck is terrible. Brox is the worst supporter that they printed for a gym leader. It is so useless. Both Onyx and Golem just do not have the damage output to do anything meaningful. Onyx takes 3 energy to do 70 damage. It doesn't even have a lot of HP to like boast, you know, just to be a bit of a wall, and it has 4 retreat costs. So when you send up the Onyx, like, it's stuck in the active. Your opponent can do whatever they want until you decide to either start attacking with it or moving it. This deck is just terrible. Golem only has 150 HP, so it just gets destroyed by a Mewtwo, and its attack does 150 damage, but it takes 50 damage itself. So like, Golem you send up and it can attack once, but then it's gone the next turn. Onyx really can't do much for you. All this time, all of these attackers in this deck need so much energy to attack that you're just never really getting anywhere. You're never like having a good board state. It is just a terrible deck. Seriously, stay away from it. Do not try it. Okay, next up in our F tier. I'm sorry, I hate to do this. I have to put Venusaur and Butterfree. Why do I have to put Venusaur and Butterfree here? Venusaur already just isn't that great of an attacker. It can only do 100 damage, and the real big problem is that, like, yeah, the healing tank strategy is cool if you can ever get to it, man. This deck requires 2 stage 2s plus 4 attachments to Bulbasaur. Good luck facing any of these meta decks if you were to play in a tournament with it and achieving that setup. Okay, every other meta deck is just so fast, they're gonna run you off of the board before you get anywhere close to that sort of board state. In the same vein, we have Alakazam and Gardevoir. Okay, same thing. 2 stage 2s. Not much more to say. While we're at it, let's throw Nidoqueen and Nidoking in there for the same reason. 2 stage 2s, not looking good. Oh, how could I forget Gengar and Gardevoir? There you go, in F tier as well. Okay, I think I'm happy with the F tier where it's at as far as the decks go into it. Now let's move on to the C tier. And guys, once again, I just want to reiterate, you can win games with pretty much every single one of these decks. That is not what we're talking about. We are talking about in the context of a tournament where half of the field is going to be Pikachu and Mewtwo. You know, you're trying to win. You're trying to place highly. You might be winning some cash. You know, an actual tournament, not just queuing onto the ladder randomly. So in C tier, I think I want to start off with Dragonite. So let's drag Dragonite Snorlax there. Dragonite, Weezing, yeah, Hypno, and Frostmoth. I feel the same about all of these decks. I will order them, however. I think that Dragonite, Frostmoth, and Dragonite, Weezing are the best ways to play Dragonite. And I think Dragonite, Hypno, and Dragonite, Snorlax. Dragonite, Hypno, very gimmicky. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's really not great. And then Dragonite, Snorlax down at the bottom. So I don't think that this deck will ever place within the top 32. It just gets hard countered by the best decks in the format. They're all just too fast for it, especially with how much Mewtwo is running around. Dragonite is just a side drive plus a Giovanni away from getting knocked out, and that's just something they you really can't deal with. You know, you want your one Dragonite to go the distance and attack twice and win you the game. But if you send up Dragonite and it gets knocked out, there's nothing you can really do. So Dragonite is going to run into too many problems in an actual tournament. I don't think it's ever going to go anywhere above top 32. Speaking of a Hypno package, let's put Alakazam Hypno in here as well. I think Alakazam Hypno is probably worse than all of these Snorlax decks. Maybe not. Or sorry, these Dragonite decks. It'll probably go right around here. Alakazam, it just has better partners. I would not pair it with Hypno. I think you could get more value out of some of the other ones. Maybe tack on some extra damage with actual attackers and not just Hypno. Yeah. Next here, we're going to grab this Raichu. Now, Raichu is going to signify Lieutenant Surge Box. I don't think Lieutenant Surge Box is too terrible. It definitely has good math. You know, the Raichu does 140 damage. That knocks out pretty much every EX. With a Giovanni, it'll knock out a Mewtwo. It's not the worst deck in the world, but it just isn't all that great. I wish it was a single prize deck using, you know, Lieutenant Surge. It just, you're allowed to do such cool plays with it, but ultimately don't think it's that great. All right, now let's also get Wheezing Muck in here as well. Wheezing Muck. I'd probably say maybe right here. The deck just isn't... It needs too much, okay? It's really hard to build up a 3 energy Muck, and you also need to poison your opponent's active before Muck actually does anything meaningful. So you need to have Wheezing up. You need to have the Koga plus 3 energy already on a built-up Muck for the Muck to go in and attack. It's just... It's not that great. There's better ways. There are better Pokemon to pair with Wheezing than Muck, so I'm going to leave it here in C. I think this Wigglytuff Golurk deck can also go into C. Now, Wigglytuff is just a better attacker than most of these guys, so I'll probably put it on the top here. Guys, this C list isn't going to be ordered perfectly just because all of these decks are, I mean, we're talking like Dragonite Hypno is like 1% better than Muck Wheezing, if it even is. You know, these aren't totally ironed out, but once we get up to the higher tiers, everything will be in perfect order on what I think is better than the other. We will also put Venusaur Lilligant in here. You use 2 attachments on the Lilligant to net you 1 energy onto the Venusaur. And then the Lilligant probably goes down the next turn, so it just doesn't seem like a good trade-off to me. The Lilligant only has 100 HP. Pretty much every other deck is going to attack that twice, and it's going to be gone, so by the time you have 2 energy on it, it basically nulls everything that it did. I just don't see it as good energy acceleration for Venusaur. Not a very good deck. I know this is going to hurt some people, putting Moltres Centiskorch in here, but the thing is that there's 2 other better partners for Moltres than Centiskorch, okay? There is, like, no benefit to running the Centiskorch, because usually your game plan with any Moltres deck is Moltres is either going to wall or get knocked out, and then you're going to go into something that's equally as hard to knock out, or just dealing a ton of damage. So Centiskorch, I mean, you spend all that time trying to get 4 energy on it so it can attack. It only has 130 HP. It's not like, it's not the most resilient thing in the world. And yeah, this one is going to make me sad. Okay, Gengar Hypno. I wish that Gengar was better than he is. Sadly, I don't think I can justify, even though I've been having so much fun with Gengar Hypno, it's just not the greatest. I mean, it's a really spongy stage 2. It's only got 170 HP, and his previous evolutions don't have a lot to begin with. It only does 100 damage, so its damage output's really low, and it doesn't benefit from any of the healing that, like, Venusaur does. It does have the cool, you know, block supporter, but that late in the game, all you're really stopping is Sabrina, and the other decks can block Sabrina just by playing better and managing their bench space better. So, yeah, unfortunately, I can't put Gengar too high. I would love to see some sort of buff somehow that makes Gengar better, because I love the card. But, yeah, I think he's going to live in C tier for probably the rest of his life. Then we're also going to move our other double stage 2 buddy. He was the only one that made it out of F tier. Alakazam Greninja. Again, just better ways to play Alakazam. Too difficult to get everything set up for it, and I just can't ever see it making top 8. Let's get Starmie Frostmoth in here as well. I just don't ever see why. This deck is probably better than C tier, but I just don't ever see why you would play Starmie Frostmoth. I mean, there are so many better partners for Starmie that Frostmoth is actually just the worst option. Frostmoth is going to buy you turns, but I don't know what you would ever be building towards. I'm not even sure why it's in this list. Honestly, I don't think it's a real deck, so I'm going to leave it in C tier. Starmie is powerful enough to keep it in C tier, but you essentially have 4 dead cards, because why would you ever attack with Frostmoth over Starmie? I just don't see a reason. For the same reason, I'm going to move both of these decks here, Arcanine Blaine / Charizard Blaine. I don't know why you would ever play these decks. You can play a better Blaine package without either of them, and they're just huge attackers who I wouldn't think you'd want to put the energy. So it just seems like there'd be way too much going on in this deck. You have the guys that can actually benefit from Blaine, plus the big attackers, either Arcanine or Charizard. Plus, you would probably need a Moltres to get the energy attaching. It just seems like too much. There's no reason to play these over the other. Just either play a Blaine box deck, or just play an Arcanine, or just play a Charizard deck. Do not combine them all. We can also put Marowak Dugtrio here. Another one where I'm not really sure why it's on here. I think it's the worst version of Marowak possible. And in that same vein, let's do the Arbok Pidgeot. I just think it's the worst version of Arbok. Arbok already is a little bit weak. And when you add a stage 2 in the mix, it's already hard enough to find all the stage 1s you're looking for. Putting a stage 2 in as well just doesn't sound that good to me. And to round off the C tier, I'm sad about this because I've tried to make Blastoise work so many times. This is just going to be Blastoise plus a generic big thing in front of it. Guys, no matter which version of Blastoise it is, I've played enough of it to know that no matter what, it's really hard to make work. They can usually just gust around your Blastoise and knock out whatever's on the bench and win the game that way. Blastoise takes 5 energy before it can actually do any big attacks. It just isn't strong enough without some form of energy acceleration that isn't Misty's. And it's also a stage, so you're pairing the inconsistency of Misty with the inconsistency of being a stage 2. It just doesn't work, guys. I'm so sad to say. It's very fun, though, so if you want to play it, go ahead, but I can't give it any higher than C. Okay, now we're going to move on to B tier with, like I said, these are decks that I would maybe expect to see 1 or 2 of in top 32. I don't think I'd ever expect to see one in top 8. If they did, I would be very, very surprised. So we're going to start with the Alolan Exeggutor Victory Bell. And at the same time, we're going to do Venusaur Alolan Exeggutor, because these two I have about the same thought process on. Alolan Exeggutor is actually a crazy strong EX, okay? It has 160 HP. Its attack does 40. If you flip a coin, it does 40 more for 1 single grass energy. This thing's early game is insane. The only thing holding it back right now is there is not a great grass type attacker to pair it with. If we get a basic grass EX or even another stage 1 grass EX that has the late game potential, or just a consistent like 120 or 100 damage output, something like that, I could see the deck actually being good. But as of right now, the Venusaur, once you finally build up to it, it's only doing 100 damage. It just doesn't really, the math never works out too great. It's also, again, it's just a stage 2. It's hard to get set up. The attack on Exeggutor, while it's good for early game pressure, let's say you're going against a Pikachu and you attack and you do 40 because you didn't flip a heads, then you attack again and you do 40 again because you didn't get another heads, the Pikachu is able to 2-shot your Exeggutor beforehand. So the coin flip is a little bit gimmicky, but when it works, it works. I've seen these decks get top 32s. I really like them. I just want to see some more grass support, and I think they could be even higher. Next on the list is going to be the Arbok Weezing. I think Arbok Weezing is better than both of these two. Arbok Weezing is a good counter pick for this meta. It's a really unique way of playing because you have really low damage output guys, but what it really tries to win off of is Weezing taking an early knockout on something, or a relatively early knockout. You wall with Weezing, and then you eventually go into Arbok, and what you do with Arbok is you Sabrina something up and trap it in the active spot with you. And Arbok is usually able to 1v1 pretty much anything that gets Sabrina'd up. The problem is that if your opponent can build up a lot of attackers on the bench, they might be able to build towards something that when you finally get into the Arbok Sabrina play, they have something to give you that can take a hit from Arbok and then just one-shot it back, and then it's just kind of GG's. So I think it's an okay deck. Top 32 seems fair for it. If I ever saw this in a top 8, I definitely would be surprised. Next up, I will do the Alakazam Weezing. Alakazam is a super, super strong attacker. Its attack perfectly one-shots like every single EX in the meta, except for like Mewtwo. If If they discard their energy properly, if they leave the Mewtwo with 2 energy, Alakazam's not going to knock it out. You need Giovanni in order to knock out some things like Starmie. But overall, this is a very good deck. It has made top 8 at a tournament, but just it's not consistent enough for me to place it that high. So anytime I see it in top 32, it makes sense to me. It's a deck to always kind of watch out for, but never really something to specifically tech for or worry about. You know, you're never going to play a deck, or you're never not going to play a deck because it has a bad Alakazam matchup. It's just not going to happen. We will also put this deck here, which I have just named Counterbox. That's what I call it when I play it. It is Primeape plus Golbat plus Marowak. And what you try to do is by playing these stage 1s, you have Primapes to deal with the Pikachus, and you have Golbats to deal with the Mewtwo's in the early game. Then you have Marowak as just like the backup, clean everything up attacker after you've already done your early aggression with either Golbat or Primeape. It's an okay deck. I've seen other versions of Primeape do better. So even though it's my favorite way to play it, I can't put it higher on the list just because, like I said, there are other versions of Marowak that are doing better. Now we're going to move these two together. So we have Machamp Marowak and Machamp. Machamp has gotten a 3rd place result in a tournament, but that was the only one it did it in. I've played quite a bit of Machamp, but now, after I've seen this list, it's a very fun deck, but it's a very high roll deck. All Machamp really tries to do is go turn 1, Machop, attach. Turn 2, evolve into Machoke, attach, attack with Machoke. Turn 3, evolve into Machamp, attack with Machamp. And that can usually win you the game if you get that hand. If you get the hand support in order to set up a Machop, Machoke, Machamp, it will basically win you the game against any meta deck. The problem is that there are a couple ways around this. Either they red card you, or you just straight up don't draw the evolutions you need. Or when you're on that Machoke turn, it's the scariest turn because Machoke only has 100 HP. That's a Pikachu plus Giovanni away from being knocked out. That's a Starmie plus a Giovanni away from being knocked out. That is an Arcanine attack. There are a whole lot of ways that the Machoke can get knocked out. And if that happens, it's GG go next. So bit of a high roll deck, but pretty fun. And someone's going to play it. Someone's going to high roll it. And it's going to do decent enough. Let's move to Starmie Greninja. Just the worst version of the other Starmie decks that are on here. Besides, of course, Starmie Frostmoth. There's a better Starmie deck. I wouldn't doubt that it could place highly because Starmie is just such a good card, and I think that Greninja actually adds some utility, unlike the Frostmoth. So yeah, I'm gonna put it in the B tier. Also in the B tier, probably this one's a little bit tricky. I think I would put it above the Machamp. I've seen this deck do well. It's definitely very interesting. I just don't think it's not quite as consistent, because what you're really hoping for is that Wigglytuff can put your opponent's active Pokemon to sleep, and you can, you know, cheat a couple turns out of it. But what you're basing your whole deck off of is can I hit this 50% coin flip? So yeah, I've seen it do well, but I don't expect it to always do well. There's never going to be a lot of people playing it, and when there's not a lot of people playing what's essentially a high roll deck, it's going to be very hard for it to convert and place higher than like top 32. So we're going to leave it in B tier. Real quick, guys, before we move on, I forgot about one guy here, Melmetal. Usually I've seen Melmetal paired with something like Hypno. I'm going to put it just in C tier. I don't have a ton of experience with this deck. It seems cool, but again, it's just coin flip reliant on whether or not you actually get to win the game. You're basically just hoping that Hypno leaves things asleep. So never a good strategy to bet on. I'll leave it in C tier. To round out our B tier, I'm going to put the Articuno at the very top of it. Articuno, super strong attacker. You guys already know. You've been turn 1 Misty. I don't need to explain it to you. It's just not consistent enough to be all the way up there, but it is just powerful enough on its own that I think it warrants the B tier. I will usually see one in top 32, literally just Articuno in the 18 item card / trainer card deck. Super powerful, just not quite consistent enough to always be placing in like top 8s in tournaments. Okay, so we are coming down to what are the best decks in the game. And so for A tier, at the bottom of A tier, I'm going to start with Primeape Marowak. Just a very good counter deck. I mean, the Primeape is so incredibly powerful. To be attacking for 100 damage on your second turn is very overwhelming for a lot of decks, especially because you get 30 damage early on with the Mankey. If you're against like a Starmie Articuno and you go Mankey Punch for 30 and then evolve into Primeape, and they evolved in their Starmie, well, you knock it out. Primeape one-shots Pikachus, and then you have the Marowak for the late game again. Marowak can just do a lot of damage if you flip 2 heads on your coin flip. Very strong deck. I definitely... I'm never surprised when I see it in top 8. Usually there's one in top 8, definitely one in top 16, but I just don't ever... this is the lowest of low on the A tier because I don't ever see it winning an event, but it's consistent enough that it will always be somewhere in like the top 16 plus. So we're going to leave it at the bottom of A. Next on our A tier list, we have the best budget deck, and that is the Blaine Box with Ninetales and Rapidash. This deck has been consistently doing good. It is not almost always, but like 50% of tournaments, there's one in top 8. I don't think it's ever gotten close to winning. It's definitely never been in a finals, but it is just such a strong, consistent deck that if you draw well, will just beat pretty much anything. It's super fun. I really love this deck, and it has the tournament results to back it up here. This one is solidly A tier. Okay, now we finally have the best way to play both Starmie and Articuno, them paired together. This deck is just so fast early on. There's just too many good things going for this deck. Okay, you have Starmie with free retreat, Starmie attacking for 90 for just 2 energy, Misty to help power your guys up. Articuno, basic attacker, can win you the game on the very first turn before your opponent even does anything. Just a ton going for this deck. The only thing that truly holds it back is there's no way for this deck to one-shot either a Pikachu or a Mewtwo. It's just... it doesn't have the damage output in order to do so, but usually it can win the games by just setting up 4 EXs that are all easy to power up thanks to Misty's and low energy attachments, and you can just bounce between the two while doing consistent damage over and over. That's usually enough to win you games, but again, the fact that it can't one-shot means your opponent can play around. They can do the same thing you do. They can just wall with multiple EXs turn after turn, and they will eventually come out ahead because they can usually build up to something that can one-shot your Starmie or Articuno. Okay, now we have Arcanine Moltres, and I'm going to put the last top of A tier card here as well. So we're going to talk about Arcanine and Charizard Moltres. I am very curious to see if this changes over time. Right now, the reason why I'm putting Charizard above Arcanine is just the fact that we've seen it be tested more. Arcanine only very recently came up. Maybe a week ago, someone discovered, wait, why are we just playing this with Charizard? It's pretty busted with Arcanine too. Let's run the Arcanine. So after some more results, I'll be happy to either put Arcanine above Charizard or not. The real strength of Arcanine comes from it is just more consistent. It takes a worse Mewtwo matchup because it can never one-shot the Mewtwo like Charizard can. But when you're playing against Pikachus, it just one-shots the Pikachus. Usually, sometimes the aggression from Arcanine, in the sense that it's just faster, it can take down the Mewtwo just by overwhelming them quicker than Charizard can. So we're going to leave Arcanine at the number 2 spot in A tier and Charizard at the number 1 spot in A tier. Okay, now lastly, very controversial. Which deck is the best in the format? Is it Pikachu? Is it Mewtwo? I'm going to say that the number 2 deck is going to be that Pikachu, okay? And we're just going to lump all the Pikachu variants in because they all perform like equally consistent. They all have the same win rate online. They're essentially the same. Just play whichever one you want. I don't know. So the reason why I think that Pikachu is worse than Mewtwo is take a look at all of the decks on here, okay? Take a look at Arcanine. Arcanine one-shots Pikachu. It's like specifically countered. It's like specifically built to counter Pikachu. Primeape Marowak destroys Pikachu. Machamp destroys Pikachu. Primeape / Golbat destroys Pikachu. All of the decks, I don't know why it is this way. If you take a look at all of the decks in this game, or not all of them, but a lot of decks have a way specifically to counter Pikachu, to either one-shot it or hit it for weakness. Something like that is going to give you a good Pikachu matchup. For Mewtwo, I have yet to find a way to make one of these decks consistently beat Mewtwo. And the reason for that is that Mewtwo just has 150 HP and can one-shot anything else in return. The only way you beat Mewtwo is by playing like a stage 2 deck and setting up better than they do while they're setting up their stage 2. Mewtwo pretty much only loses to Mewtwo. Mewtwo loses when it can't get Kirlia into Gardevoir. But if you're a Mewtwo player and you see, okay, I've started Mewtwo, my hand is Ralt, Kirlia, Gardevoir. You literally just win the game. There is so little that your opponent can do if you just get into that Gardevoir on your, what would it be, your third turn of the game. There's so little anybody can do. Mewtwo is just by far the strongest deck. It has the target on its back, but I just don't think there's a way to deal with it in this current meta with the cards that we have. I haven't seen a way. I would love it if someone found a way, but I have not seen a way. So just because Pikachu gets hard countered by like Arcanine and all of these other decks, I think I have to put it in the second place spot. Mewtwo for now, as long as it sets up, which it does consistent enough in a best of 3 tournament, you're probably not going to brick both games. You're probably going to set up 2 out of the 3, and that's really all Mewtwo needs to win. And if you look at some of the recent tournament results, man, oh my gosh, I saw one the other day. I believe 7 out of the 8 top decks were Mewtwo's. So this thing is certainly on a warpath right now. It's only getting better as people find what the best card to pair it with. People have now teched in the baby Mewtwo, which also one-shots Pikachu. So it's like all of the hate is directed at Pikachu. None of it is directed at Mewtwo because no one can figure out what hate to give it in order to beat it. So this is going to be the tier list. Let me know how you guys would rank. Let me know where I went wrong on some of these decks. I feel pretty confident. I've played a lot of the game. I've looked at a lot of tournament results. Don't really know that I'll budge on anything, but maybe you can convince me. Thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to sub to the channel. I'll see you on the next one.